New Cure for Diabetes. Please welcome Marianne.
I'm very honored to have the opportunity to speak to all of you this morning, so thank you, Jerry, for inviting me. So you've heard about the prevalence of diabetes and its economic impact. So I guess I'm here to make it a little bit more personal and to give just one face to the disease that is affecting people at epidemic proportions. The truth is, I don't think I'm your average person living with type 1 diabetes. I don't have a particularly sad story, and I probably won't make any of you cry, but what I hope to do is inspire each of you into believing that one person can make a difference in the lives of others. So I'd like to share with you how being diagnosed with type 1 diabetes almost 6 years ago has deeply impacted my life. So I was 24 years old, healthy, active, and in great physical shape. I had great family, friends, and a good job, and I really felt like I was on top of the world. And so the day before my brother's 25th birthday, I became dehydrated, weak, and lethargic. And I didn't want to worry my parents, so I suffered quietly. But when I started vomiting, I knew something was wrong. And my mom, who has type 2 diabetes, checked my blood sugar. It was 276. So I had no idea what that meant, but my mom did, and she rushed me to the hospital. And so a few hours and several liters of IV later, I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And I was prescribed some medication and sent home with my mom, who literally seemed to have aged about 10 years from worry. So type 2 is very prominent in my family. And long ago, I felt resigned to my fate to eventually develop type 2 diabetes, but it wasn't supposed to happen yet. But, not wanting to worry my parents anymore, I said I was fine, and I told myself it could be worse. I could have to take insulin shots every day. So the next day was my brother's 25th birthday, and my dad went to work, and my mom reluctantly left me at home to pick up his birthday cake. And I'd taken my medication as instructed, but I felt weaker and more dehydrated as the day went on. And by the time that my mom got home, I could barely speak because I was so dehydrated. I drank glass after glass of water, and I felt like I could never quench my thirst. And so when we checked my blood sugar, the meter just said high. It wasn't even a number. So I was ushered to the ER, and after some tests and more bags of IV, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And it was then that I cried. And I couldn't help it. I just felt robbed of my youth and of my freedom, and just the shock of being diagnosed type 2 one day and then type 1 the next was too much for me. But when I saw the devastated look in my parents' faces, I made a conscious decision to make the most of my situation. And so we spent my brother's 25th birthday in the ER, and I put on a brave face and told my family that I would be fine. And I was, and I still am. So since that fateful day, I've learned a lot about myself and about my body. I learned how to count carbs and calculate my insulin to carb ratio. I read a lot of books on living with diabetes. I got on the insulin pump after 6 months. And I remember at that time, the Atkins diet was really trendy. And I felt offended when people assumed that I was dieting. So I was afraid of being judged and afraid of having something happen to me while I was at work. I began educating everyone around me about diabetes. I showed them my pump, showed them my glucose tablets, I told them about the symptoms of hypoglycemia. And I really tried to dispel the old beliefs that diabetics had to avoid all sugars. I hated being judged for eating anything sweet, no matter how small the portion was. And I also learned, I hope that there's a study on this one day, but I learned that when I go shopping, the more that I spend, the quicker my blood sugar would drop. So I learned to be prepared with glucose tablets and a snack, especially when I go to a favorite store. But most importantly, I learned that I had a passion to help educate others about diabetes. And then I met a man who would eventually become my husband. He's here with me today. And I remember feeling a little bit awkward when I showed him my insulin pump for the first time. I had shown it to so many people before, but suddenly I felt a little bit embarrassed, as though it made me part robot or something. But to my surprise, he actually thought it was really cool. And he encouraged me to keep sharing my story and teach others. And eventually, he helped me to create my blog, diabetes.org. So when I hear the word Betty, I think of like a beach Betty or a skate Betty, and it conjures an image of a really strong and independent woman. So a diabetes is a strong and independent woman who does not let her diabetes get in the way of her active lifestyle. So diabetes.org was born, and when I first blogged, I felt really exposed and kind of naked out there. I posted the story of my diagnosis, and then I just waited. I didn't know what else to say. But the wait was worth it. Emails began trickling in from different parts of the world, from people thanking me for sharing my story. And I felt really empowered to share more. I wrote about my ups and downs. I wrote about things related to diabetes as well as other things that were going on in my life. And I linked to resources like the American Diabetes Association and Diabetes Society. So Diabetes was featured in the Sydney Morning Herald. It's an Australian newspaper and different blogs across the country. I spoke at the Walk for Diabetes in 2005. And in 2006, I was interviewed and featured in Positive Thinking magazine. And later that year, I shared my experiences with author Jill Sklar in her book, The 5 Gifts of Illness. I also began facilitating a type 1 teen support group at the Diabetes Society. And then Yahoo hired me to blog on their Yahoo Health expert blogs. And I called mine a diary of a diabetic. So I eventually quit my job at Yahoo to get a Master of Public Health degree, and I graduated last May, and I'm now working at the San Francisco Department of Public Health and Chronic Disease Prevention. So as you can see, diabetes has really transformed my life. And don't get me wrong, it hasn't all been positive. It's a really high maintenance disease, and I've definitely had my share of problems. In fact, a few years ago, I had trouble with the insertion set for my insulin pump, and I actually lost consciousness at work. I collapsed in front of my coworker, and I hit my head on the floor, and luckily, I taught him well, and he actually knew where my glucose gel was, and he knew what to do before the paramedics arrived. And interestingly, that insertion set was recalled shortly after that incident. And I still have my fair share of days when I'm tired of living with diabetes. In fact, this past weekend, I was getting ready for a 10K run in San Francisco, and in the 90-degree weather, I had to wear a pack, around my waist with my meter, my lancet, my test strips, my glucose tablets, and my insulin pump. And I just felt so weighed down by all my supplies. And I remember wishing that I wasn't diabetic, and that I just had the freedom to go and run and enjoy myself, But then I remind myself that my diabetes has really helped shape who I am today, and it's given me a passion and a purpose in life. But not everybody has the same attitude as I do about living with diabetes. So I wanted to share with you some of the emails that people have sent me through diabetes over the years. So one young woman writes, I've lived with type 1 diabetes for the last 11 years of my life, and now I am 22 years old. I was so scared when I found out that I had it. I went years without taking care of myself until I got real sick. I found myself in a coma, but I pulled through. And I just wanted to say thanks for what you're doing. It's like you really understand how hard it is to be young and in school, have boyfriends, and just be normal when you have to shoot up all the time and prick your finger. Thanks a lot. Your story really helped me. Another young woman sent this to me on New Year's Eve. I was diagnosed with type 1 when I was 18 years old and just starting college. When I read your story, I was initially shocked that there was someone who felt exactly what I felt back then. Angry, shameful, depressed, and devastated. I shut even my family members out until all I do was yell at my siblings. I just couldn't accept the fact that I am a diabetic. But your story showed me that it is not the end of the world, because life still goes on. I'm glad that I stumbled upon your site and read your story, and I shall look ahead to the new year with greater optimism. Thanks. And the last one that I'd like to share with you is from a 33-year-old woman who had been living with type 2 diabetes for about 10 years. So she was diagnosed about the same time that I was, the same age. She writes, I'm in bad shape, not taking care of myself. My last A1C was 10.0. I'm married and I'm desperate to have a baby. But it seems like such an insurmountable goal that I've kind of given up. Reading your story has given me a kick in the butt. If you can do it and you're so young, I should be able to do it also. I guess this is a note of thanks. Your story has inspired me. So these emails are a constant reminder to me of why we need to find a cure. Almost everyone I know is touched by diabetes in some way, whether they have it or they love or care for someone who has it. Diabetes is everywhere. So, in closing, I hope that I was able to inspire you in some small way to realize that not only can each of us make a difference, but we really need to. And being here is a step in the right direction. Thank you.